Welcome to a journey through the rich history of Murrieta, California, a place that evolved from Native American land to Spanish Ranchos to a sleepy farm town and finally into a bustling suburban city. In this documentary-style exploration, we'll travel across time, from the first peoples who thrived here, through the Spanish and Mexican eras of missions and ranchos, to the American period of railroads, resorts, booms, and busts. Along the way, we'll meet the characters and sheep that shaped Murrieta's story, visit landmarks that still whisper of the past, and see how this once tiny hamlet became the modern community it is today. So get comfortable as we delve into Murrieta's complete history, told in a casual, storytelling tone, with a touch of legend and plenty of facts for the history buffs. Long before Murrieta was a city, or even a ranch, this land was home to the Luiseño people, who are part of the Payom-Cowichum, or people of the West. For thousands of years, the Luiseño and their ancestors lived in the Temecula Valley, which includes today's Murrieta. They hunted game in the hills, gathered acorns under ancient oaks, and left behind bedrock mortars, stone tools, and rock art as evidence of their rich culture. In fact, the Luiseño established a village called Avaax on the very site where Murrieta now stands. Life here revolved around the rhythms of nature. Everyone in the community had roles and responsibilities, and knowledge was passed down through oral traditions and stories of how the world was created. Everything changed when the Spaniards arrived. In 1797, a Spanish explorer priest, Father Juan Norberto de Santiago, passed through this valley while scouting locations for new missions. By the next year, Mission San Luis Rey de Francia was established to the south, near present-day Oceanside, and the native people here were drawn into the mission system. The Luiseño, so named by the Spanish after the mission, faced upheaval. They endured European diseases and a new way of life that disrupted their traditions. Despite these challenges, the Luiseño people survived and remain part of this region's story to this day. As Spanish rule gave way to Mexican rule in the early 19th century, the mission lands were secularized. The missions were closed by the 1830s, and vast land grants called ranchos were created. In 1844, the Mexican governor granted Rancho Temecula, a 26,000-acre tract that covered a huge part of today's Murrieta and Temecula, to a Californio soldier named Felix Valdez. This grant, along with the adjacent Rancho Pauba, put most of the valley into the hands of a few private owners. For a while, a Frenchman named Jean-Louis Vignier, known as Don Juan Luis Vignier, owned both Rancho Temecula and Pauba. Under Mexican California, the area was used largely for cattle ranching. Vaqueros, cowboys, tended herds on the open range, and the region was very sparsely populated, except for the native villages and scattered adobe ranch houses. After the Mexican-American War of 1846 to 1848, California became part of the United States, and the old ranchos eventually had to be confirmed by U.S. courts. By the 1860s, the Temecula/Murrieta area remained rural ranch land, but things were about to change when a certain family with big dreams arrived. Enter Juan Murrieta, the man who would give the city its name. Juan was a Basque Californio rancher, not to be confused with the infamous bandit Joaquin Murrieta, a completely different person. In 1873, Juan Murrieta, along with his brother Ezequiel Murrieta and two partners, Domingo Pujol and Francisco Sanjurjo, made a bold investment. They purchased the Rancho Temecula and Rancho Pauba lands, totaling 52,000 acres of this valley. Ezequiel thought the valley's rolling grasslands and oak-dotted hills reminded him of their homeland in Spain, and the group intended to raise sheep here. Although Ezequiel soon returned to Spain, after marrying, he handed his share to Juan Murrieta pressed on with the ranching venture. He reportedly brought thousands of sheep, about 7,000 of them, according to contemporary accounts, down from Northern California to graze in the valley in 1873. One can only imagine the scene: dusty herds of bleating sheep flooding the valley floor, and a hopeful rancher envisioning a prosperous ranch. For a time, the Murrieta Ranch thrived, and Juan Murrieta became a notable figure in the area. He even built a house and established a small community nucleus. But the real birth of the town came about because of the Iron Horse, the railroad. In the early 1880s, railroad companies were racing to connect Southern California to the rest of the country. Juan Murrieta, seeing an opportunity, granted a 100-foot wide right-of-way across his land in 1882 to the California Southern Railroad, part of the Santa Fe Railway. By 1887, a railroad depot was completed in the town, tying this once remote valley into the Southern California rail network and the nationwide transcontinental route. The town's location was now on the map, literally, as a stop along the line. Land developers took notice. In 1884, the Temecula Land and Water Company bought 14,500 acres from Juan Murrieta and laid out a town site beside the new railroad tracks. They named the planned community Murrieta in honor of Juan. With the railroad bringing in newcomers, the late 1880s saw the town blossom from open ranchland into a fledgling town. By 1890, Murrieta's population had swelled to roughly 800 residents, a veritable boom for that era. To serve these new inhabitants, the essentials of a western town popped up. A post office, established in 1885, a grammar school for the local children, opened October 1885, and churches like the Methodist Episcopal Church, dedicated in 1887. Small businesses began lining the dirt roads, general stores, blacksmiths, and eateries, catering to settlers, ranchers, and rail travelers alike. The town was buzzing with the optimism of a railroad town on the rise. As the 20th century dawned, Murrieta was still a modest but lively town. One of the town's crown jewels emerged from an unlikely source. Those same natural hot springs that once gave Juan's sheep a nice warm bath turned out to be a major attraction. In 1902, a German immigrant named Friedrich Fritz Gunther purchased the land around the Murrieta Hot Springs with a grand vision. He transformed the site into a world-class health resort, capitalizing on the mineral-rich waters bubbling up from the earth. By advertising restorative mud baths and therapeutic mineral soaks as virtual fountains of youth, Gunther's resort quickly gained fame. Visitors flocked to Murrieta Hot Springs from Los Angeles, San Diego, and even overseas, seeking cures for their ailments or just a luxurious retreat in the peaceful countryside. In the first half of the 1900s, the resort flourished and brought a touch of glamour to the area. It was said to be especially popular among Hollywood stars and the Jewish community of Southern California, earning it the nickname the Catskills of Southern California, as a nod to the famous New York mountain resorts. Murrieta's downtown, meanwhile, remained small and rustic. In those early decades of the 20th century, ranching and farming were the backbone of the local economy. The train brought in visitors and hauled out agricultural products. In 1918, a large grain elevator was built in Murrieta Valley to store local wheat harvests. The town had a single grammar school, rebuilt in 1920 after the first one was taken down, a couple of churches, and a handful of shops like the Tarwater and Burnham General Stores that served as community hubs. Life moved at a slower pace. Neighbors knew each other, and community events were big news. One such tradition started in the late 1940s. The Volunteer Fire Department's annual Fireman's Barbecue, begun in 1948 as a fundraiser, became a beloved local gathering. Residents would turn out for barbecue, games, and small-town camaraderie, a slice of classic Americana. However, not everything was rosy. Murrieta experienced a bust after its early boom. The very railroad that created Murrieta's boomtown atmosphere eventually faltered. In 1935, passenger trains stopped running to Murrieta. The last train left the Murrieta depot on March 18, 1935. With the loss of rail service, the stream of tourists to the hot springs slowed to a trickle. The Great Depression era was hard on the resort business, and Murrieta's growth stalled. By the late 1930s, Murrieta was slipping back into quiet obscurity, a small country town, as later historians would call it. The hot springs resort carried on, and local families kept ranching and farming, but the big dreams of the 1880s were largely on pause. Murrieta entered the mid-20th century as a sleepy, tight-knit rural community with a population that dwindled or stagnated. During the 1940s, 50s, and 60s, Murrieta remained an unincorporated town in the vast expanse of southwestern Riverside County. It was the kind of place with more horses than people. In fact, by 1980, the population was estimated at only around 2,200 residents. For comparison, nearby cities like Riverside or San Diego were booming metropolises, but Murrieta was still largely rural. Ranching families and longtime residents kept the town's spirit alive. The local Murrieta School, by then a newer elementary on Adams Avenue since 1958, taught generations of ranch kids. The Murrieta Garage and General Store in the tiny downtown stayed open, serving as community meeting spots where folks would gossip about weather and crops. The old Murrieta Hot Springs Resort also continued to operate, changing hands a couple of times. In 1970, the Gunther family finally sold the resort after nearly 70 years of ownership. The property went through various owners, and even a stint as a hippie commune in the 1980s. Yes, the quiet Murrieta Hot Springs briefly became home to a New Age spiritual group. Through these mid-century decades, Murrieta's identity was very much that of a Mayberry-like small town. No stoplights, no malls, just open sky and country roads. One reason Murrieta stayed small was that it was a bit off the beaten path. The main road that did exist was U.S. Highway 395, which ran north-south through the region as a two-lane highway. In the 1940s and 50s, travelers on 395 might stop for gas or a meal at Ray's Murrieta Cafe, a local diner, but there was little reason to settle in Murrieta. In 1955, Highway 395 was even realigned to a slightly different route through the neighboring Menifee Valley, bypassing some of Murrieta. This made Murrieta feel even more off the map. So for about 50 years, from the 1930s to the early 1980s, Murrieta snoozed quietly. Locals later joked that the town's most exciting news in those years might be a really good crop of alfalfa or a new volunteer fire truck. But big changes were on the horizon, fueled by California's post-war growth and a new interstate freeway that would link Murrieta to the world in a whole new way. The fuse was lit in the early 1980s. The completion of Interstate 15, I-15, through the Temecula Valley turned out to be a game-changer for Murrieta. Suddenly, this quiet town was directly connected by a modern freeway to job centers in San Diego County to the south and Orange County to the west. Land in Murrieta was relatively cheap and wide open, making it a prime target for developers looking to build affordable suburban housing for commuters. And build they did. Starting in the late 1980s, tract home neighborhoods began popping up on former pastures almost overnight. Families from San Diego, Orange County, and Los Angeles, enticed by the promise of larger homes and safer streets at a fraction of the big city price, started moving in. Murrieta's population exploded in what might be one of the most dramatic transformations in California city history. To put it in numbers, around 1980, only approximately 2,200 people lived here. By 1990, about 19,000 residents called Murrieta home, an increase of nearly 770% in just a decade. With this rapid growth came the urge for local control. In the late 1980s, residents began discussing that Murrieta should become its own city rather than stay under county governance. A grassroots campaign for cityhood kicked off around 1988. Longtime Murrietans and new suburbanites banded together, and after much effort, petitions, town hall meetings, and probably a few heated debates, success came in 1991. On July 1, 1991, Murrieta officially incorporated as a city. It was a moment of pride and a key milestone in Murrieta's American period. The newly minted city of Murrieta already had over 24,000 residents at incorporation, and it set up its own city government, police department, formed in 1992, and other services. The city founders faced the challenge of managing breakneck growth while trying to preserve a sense of community. Cityhood did not slow Murrieta's expansion. If anything, the city boomed even faster through the 1990s and early 2000s. New schools, shopping centers, parks, and housing tracts continued to spring up. By 2000, the population had already doubled to over 50,000, and by 2010, it exceeded 100,000, making Murrieta one of the fastest-growing cities in California during that time. This influx brought not just people, but also businesses and infrastructure. The once sleepy downtown got traffic lights and new civic buildings. A large modern library opened in 1998, and hospitals and shopping plazas soon followed. Murrieta had evolved into a bedroom community, a place where many residents commute to jobs elsewhere. Los Angeles, San Diego, and Orange County are all within driving distance, but also a community with its own identity, good schools, and a reputation as one of the safest cities in the region. Murrieta's complete history is a tale of transformation. From the ancient homeland of the Luiseño to a Mexican rancho to a dusty railroad boomtown, then a quiet farming village, and now a thriving suburban city. Each chapter left its mark. The native heritage survives in place names and archaeological sites. The ranching and hot springs era gave Murrieta its name and a touch of fame, and the modern boom has brought diversity and opportunity. Through all these changes, Murrieta has managed to blend the old with the new. It's a place where you can relax in a century-old hot spring bath in the morning, then attend a high-tech business opening in the afternoon. It's a community proud of its past. You'll hear stories of the Murrieta family, of Fritz Gunther's resort, and of the day the first freeway off-ramp opened, even as it looks toward the future. Whether you're strolling through the historic downtown or driving past new developments on Los Alamos Road, Murrieta's history is all around, speaking to those who listen. And as this city continues to grow and evolve, it carries forward the legacy of those who came before. From the first native inhabitants, to the pioneers and ranchers, to the families who built a modern city out of humble beginnings. Murrieta's story is truly a California story, one of resilience, reinvention, and community spirit. And it's a story that's still being written.